علي ولي الله غضب العلوي تفجر الله أكبر حيدر 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 الله أكبر لا إله إلا الله محمد رسول الله لا إله إلا الله علي ولي الله.
Assalamu alaikum and welcome back to Beardless. I'm your host today. My name is Sayyid Ali and I've got brother Zain Rizvi, also known as Shia Blade Runner.
Okay, Shia Blade Runner in the house.
So today we'll be going into a very interesting topic.
What topic is it?
Today we're going to be talking about Tawheed. And for those who are not familiar to this term, especially the non-Muslims, we're going to be talking about God, His essence and His attributes. So without further ado, I just want to pass on to brother Zain and inshallah he will elaborate further.
That's it. So we are going to be talking about Tawheed, the oneness of God. And in case you guys don't know, you probably already do, but Islam is Abrahamic faith. It follows the Abrahamic prophets just as Judaism and Christianity does. And every single Abrahamic faith believes in Tawheed. They all claim to believe in the oneness of God, and they all try and adhere to this concept of the oneness of God. And so every religion and every sect of every religion will claim that its version of Tawheed, its concept of the oneness of God, is the most perfect, if you will. Judaism would argue, for example, they have the perfect Tawheed, Sayyid.
Absolutely.
Christians would argue they have the perfect Tawheed.
Hindus
also.
Sikhs.
Trinitarians, although they believe in the three Godhead in one aspect,
they
believe that
even devil worshippers, even though
technically, but they believe, those Trinitarians believe that belief is the purest form of Tawheed. And then the Muslims came. They said, no, you guys got it wrong. We have the best form of Tawheed.
Absolutely.
And then every sect in Islam claimed they had the best form of Tawheed.
We need to be a bit more clear here. When they say that the Christians have the wrong form of Tawheed, what do they accuse them of? Polytheism. They say that look, you are essentially ascribing partners to Allah.
Who?
The Christians.
Well,
that's the question.
But who says that?
Yeah, that's the question.
That's the question we're going to get into.
Who actually ascribes partners to Allah? So
this is the concept we're going to be talking about, inshallah. We're going to be talking about Tawheed, some of the theological aspects of Tawheed from the Christian narrative, from the Judaism narrative, and then from the Islamic narrative. And in particular, we're going to be looking at the Islamic narrative, and we're going to be looking at some of the sectarians' theology, looking at different aspects of Tawheed from the Sunnis and to the Shias, and also even some subsects of the Sunnis and some subsects of the Shias. And inshallah, we're going to try to prove from an objective level today, so this is the aim of today, from an objective level, from a non-biased perspective, that the Tawheed of Islam is the purest. And then of Islam, the sect which has the purest form of Tawheed is Shias. Inshallah, we're going to try and prove this through some references from some from an objective, non-biased arguments. And inshallah, we're going to start by reading. If Sayyid Ali, would you like to take it from there?
Sure. So the verse I'd like to read from the Holy Quran is in chapter 3, verse 7. And it says, "It is He," meaning it is Allah, "who has sent down to you, O Muhammad, the book. In it are verses that are precise. They are the foundation of the book. And others are unspecific."
Unspecific, yes.
Yeah. "As for those whose hearts are deviation," which inshallah we'll find out whose hearts are deviated, "they follow that of it which is unspecific, seeking discord and seeking an interpretation suitable to them. And no one knows its true interpretation except Allah. But those firm in knowledge," those who are firm in knowledge, meaning according to us, this would refer to the Ahlul Bayt alayhi salam. "We believe in it. All is from our Lord, and no one will be reminded except those of understanding." So from here we can see that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Holy Quran that when it comes to the verses of the Quran, you have clear verses and then you have allegorical verses. Okay? And normally those who have deviation in the heart, they will run to the unclear verses and try to establish the belief on this. Now what I mean by this is one of the arguments which is used against the Shias, and it's something which is often repeated on social media. Sometimes you can hear, sometimes YouTube videos, debates, dialogues, discussions. And one of the arguments they bring up, they always say, you bring us a clear, concise verse of the Holy Quran, which essentially proves imamah.
Which is one of the fundamentals of your faith.
Yeah, which is, because obviously imamah for us is one of our fundamentals of beliefs of our faith. So likewise, what we're going to look at here is we're going to reverse that, and we're going to see if we were to apply this very same logic, that if you bring us a clear-cut verse from the Quran, how we would fall in discord. And what I mean by this is the very our opponents, they say that, look, you bring us a clear verse on Imama, fine, no problem. Even if we give him a clear verse on Imama, they'll still deny it. Yeah.
But today we're going to apply the same principle, which they've applied to us, which is fine. But now we're going to apply the same principle to their aspect of Tawheed. And when we say they and are, we're referring to sects in Islam. So some different sects have, as Sayyid Ali mentioned, some different sects have mentioned that the Shiism have a certain position on Imamah. So now we're going to mention, if you want to hold and adhere to this principle, that any belief we have must be clear-cut in the Quran, then we are going to apply the same principle in regards to Tawheed.
Yeah.
Take it off.
So when we're talking about Sifat, we're talking about attributes of Allah. Okay. So first we have the Sifat al-Aqliya, meaning the rational, logical attributes of Allah, which can be understood by anyone, even a non-Muslim person. So for example, by this, something which is based on sound reasoning, and there would be things that our intellect would have no problem accepting. For example, Allah being the all-knowing, the all-listening. Allah wouldn't be the deaf one, for example. He would be the all-listening one. So this would come with the Sifat al-Aqliya.
Like using the deductive argument from science, you would have to prove that if the universe began to exist.
Absolutely. If we look at a stone...
If you use the ontological argument, then you would have to come to a conclusion that whoever created that universe was uncreated, it was powerful, it was timeless. So you can come to these conclusions
rational
based on your own rationality.
Absolutely.
With no knowledge prior to seeking religion.
Absolutely. So now we got one element which is Sifat Aqliya. Then we have Sifat al-Khabariya, meaning the verses of the Quran, which if we were to take them to face value, we would have to, it would go against logic. Meaning, what I mean by this, for example, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, He has a face, or He has a shin, or He has hands. These are known as Sifat al-Khabariya. So we wouldn't take these traditions to be literal, because you would fall in chaos, because then you would have problems trying to interpret one part of the Quran with the other part of the Quran. And last but not least, which we're not discussing, which will be Sifat al-Manawiya. And what we mean by Sifat al-Manawiya is certain emotions. For example, Allah being angry or Allah being happy. But today, specifically, we're going to stick to Sifat al-Khabariya, meaning those verses in the Quran which mention the physical attributes of God.
So Tawheed is a massive topic, if you guys will. As in, we could sit here by the end of 24 hours and still not finish Tawheed. We can talk about His free will, predestination. We can talk about Allah's power, His cans and can'ts. What we're talking about today is the essence of God. Yes, His essence of God. When, for example, in previous scriptures and in the Quran, Allah refers to His hands and His face and His legs. We're going to be referring to these attributes and seeing whether they have a literalistic interpretation or a metaphorical interpretation.
Absolutely.
This is the main crux of the matter today, isn't it, Sayyid?
Yeah, absolutely. And this is why I started with that verse in the Quran, about those people whose hearts have deviation. They run to those verses which are unclear. Okay. So what is Tafweed al-Mana? Tafweed al-Mana, according to famous lexicons like, for example, Allama ibn Mansour, the author of Lisan al-Arab, he says Tafweed al-Mana, it means to leave the matter with someone else and to make them the judge. So Tafweed al-Mana means that if there's an issue, you would leave this matter for somebody else to deal with. And in this case, what we could say is Tafweed al-Mana in reference to the Sifat of Allah, when it comes to Sifat al-Khabariya, is to refer the matter back to Allah, since He is the one who understands His meaning the best. However, Tafweed al-Mana is something which is debated theologically within Sunnism. For example, you have one group of people, the Asharis, who would not stop when it comes to Tafweed al-Mana. They would confirm that these attributes are actual attributes, meaning Allah does have hands, He does have a face, He does have a shin, and so forth.
You got into Tafweed al-Mana. Of course, this is something which exists within the Islamic paradigm, not even the Christian and Jewish theology. We haven't gone quite there yet. What we're talking is about the way you can interpret some of the verses. Whether you can come in from a point where you say, we can't discuss this, and a point where you say, we can discuss this. This is what I think Sayyid is trying to allude to. But Sayyid, what we're going to do to begin with, I think, Sayyid, is you're going to go to, I think, one of the sermons of Shiism.
Absolutely. I think before we go any further, I'd like to quote a very famous book. It's Najr al-Balagha, a book which is often quoted.
So before we go into depth into the topic, what we want to do is just establish our position first, so we can let the viewers know exactly what the Shiite theology position is on the oneness of God, on Tawheed. And then inshallah we're going to go through the various the theology of other religions and then compare them against our own.
So this is a book known as Najr al-Balagha. It's a very this book is referred to quite a bit in both Shia and Sunni circles. So this sermon is the very first sermon in Najr al-Balagha. Najr al-Balagha is available online as well. And this sermon is sermon number 1. And this is how Imam Ali alayhi salam introduces God. Okay? Praise is due to Allah, whose worth cannot be described by speakers, whose bounties cannot be counted by calculators, and whose claim to obedience cannot be satisfied by those who attempt to do so, whom the height of intellectual courage cannot appreciate, and the divings of understanding cannot reach. He whose description's no limit has been laid down, no eulogy exists, no time is ordained, and no duration is fixed. He brought forth creation through his omnipotence, dispersed winds through his compassion, and made firm the shaking earth with rocks. The foremost in religion is the acknowledgement of him. The perfection of acknowledging him is to testify him. The perfection of testifying him is to believe in his oneness. The perfection of believing in his oneness is to regard him pure. And the perfection of his purity is to deny him attributes. Because every attribute is a proof that is different from that to which is attributed, and everything to which something is attributed is different from the attribute. Thus, whoever attaches attributes to Allah recognizes his likes, and who recognizes his likes regards him to recognize parts for him, and who recognizes parts for him mistook him, and who mistook him pointed him, and who pointed at him admitted limitations for him, and who admitted limitations for him numbered him. Whoever said in what is he held that he is contained, and whoever said on what he is held he is not something else. He is a being, but not through phenomenon of coming into being. He exists, but not from non-existence. He is with everything, but not in the physical nearness. He is different from everything, but not in physical separation. He acts, but without connotation of movements and instruments. He sees even when there is none to be looked at from among his creation. He is only one, such that there is none with whom he may keep company or whom he may miss in his absence. And this is how Imam Ali alayhi salam, the first holy Imam, introduces God in Najr al-Balagha in sermon number 1. And as I said, this book is available online. You can Google it, it will come up.
So this is the Shiite position on monotheism. Shiite position on Tawheed. So Imam Ali is who the Shias recognize as the first successor of Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him and his family. And he has clearly stated here, Allah is one, He is omnipotent, He is outside of time and location. Yes, so it's a clear understanding of the Shia interpretation of Tawheed. Now inshallah we're going to get into the crux of the matter and speak about some of the biblical narratives of Tawheed, and then we're going to go to Islam and then discuss maybe which sects resemble the Old Testament and the biblical narrative of Tawheed the most, and which one has the purest form of Tawheed. So we're going to go in kind of an ordered, structured, chronological process. Biblical narrative of Tawheed, Islamic narrative of Tawheed, and we're going to delve into the sects of Islam and the various theological differences between different sects of
Absolutely. I just want to point out another scholar at this point as well. I know we mentioned Imam alayhi salam, but from a theological point of view, one of our most notable scholars, known as Sheikh Saduq, he has a book called the Shia Creed. It's available online. You can Google it, it'll come up. And Sheikh Saduq, in the very first chapter of in his book, the Shia Beliefs, he says in chapter 1, As for the reports which lead in ignorant persons to imagine that Allah is comparable to his creatures, their meanings can be understood by significance of similar passages in the Quran. For example, in the Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, everything is perishable except his face. That's in Surah 28:88. Now the meaning of wajh in this context is deen, religion, and wajh is the way by Allah is attained and wherewith we can turn to. So in short, Sheikh Saduq himself states that the Shia Imami position, the 12th position, is that any report, any narration which contradicts the Quran is automatically rejected, and any report which leads an ignorant person to believe in the literal sense of these words, they need to understand that the Quran has an explanation to these verses elsewhere.
Yes, every single verse is explainable. Inshallah, you've jumped a bit of the gun there.
Yeah.
You went to Wajhullah, so you're skipping some of the traditions. But you have to go in order process. Inshallah, we're going to explain the face of Allah. We're going to explain how some different sects in Islam have actually interpreted that specific ayat which mentions the face of Allah as literal, and believing that they, on the Day of Judgment, will literally see the face of Allah. But inshallah, Sayyid, let's start with the first reference. Okay, so the first aspect of Tawheed that we are going to be going for is Allah created Adam in his own image. Inshallah, Sayyid, why don't you read the biblical narrative?
Sure, Sayyid. Before I do go to the biblical narrative, I know I want to come back slightly a bit. And I want to keep this as a very general discussion, because this is a conversation. This is a conversation between me and the Zen, and likewise it's with the views as well. So earlier, when I mentioned the word tafweed al-mana, when I say to this is a meaning which usually a school of one group of Muslims, they'll say that when it comes to certain attributes of Allah, we'll refer it back to Allah and we won't take them literally. Okay, tafweed al-mana, according to the Salafi movement, is they do not stop there. They will take the literal meaning. I have a book here. It's called Al-Aqidah Al-Wasatiyah by Ibn Taymiyyah, and the person who's wrote a commentary on it is Muhammad ibn Salih al-Uthaymeen, and this book is available online. Okay, likewise you could probably buy it from any Salafi published bookshop, or you'll be able to purchase this book. In volume number 1, in page number 120, okay, he says in reference to tafweed al-mana, he says, in any case, there is no doubt that those who say that the madhab of the people of the Sunnah and the Jama'ah is tafweed are wrong, because the madhab of the people of the Sunnah is to affirm the meanings and surrender the knowledge regarding it is how to Allah the Exalted. So what he says here is that when it comes to tafweed al-mana, they literally take the literal meaning of these verses. Just want to bring up another quote, and this is, should you just bear with me a minute?
Yeah, sure.
Page 125, and it's in volume 1. He says, it becomes clear that the path of tafweed is a mistaken path. So he says that, look, when it comes to certain verses of the Holy Quran, to refrain or to hold back from actually taking the literal meaning, he says it's a mistaken path because it compromises 3 evils: bellying the Quran's ascription of ignorance to the messenger and making way for the philosophers. Those who say that the position of the Salaf is that of tafweed have lied against the Salaf. They, the Salaf, rather affirm the expression and meaning. So again, according to the view and the statement of Ibn Taymiyyah, who was one of the first few people, which inshallah we'll get at, took the literal meaning of these verses and never restrained from holding back. And this is a book, Sharh al-Aqidah Wasatiyah, volume 1, and I mentioned the page and reference number earlier. So coming to this tradition, Sayyid, we're going to start.
Yes.
So what we're going to try to do is we're going to try to show how certain hadith, which are narrated in the most authentic books of the Sunnis, and compare them to, the old, you could say, biblical verses from the Old Testament, to see how their concept of Tawheed when it comes to Sifat al-Khabariyah is pretty much identical to the Jews. So the first one is mentioned in Genesis 1, number 27, and it says, so God created mankind in his own image. In the image of God, he created them, male and female, and he created them. So as you can see from Genesis 1:27, God is saying he created man in his own image. Now we'll go to the Hadith. In Sahih Muslim, book 40, Hadith number 6809. Abu Hurairah reported Allah's Messenger saying that the Exalted, the Glorious, created Adam in his own image, with his length of 60 cubits, and he created him. He told him to greet the group, and that was party of angels sitting there and listen to the response that they gave him, for it would form his greeting and that of his offspring. And then he went away and said, "Peace be upon you." The angels said, "May there be peace upon you and the mercy of Allah," and they made an addition of mercy of Allah. So he who would get into paradise would get into the form of Adam. His length being 60 cubits, then the people who followed him continued to diminish in size up to this day. So as we can see from the biblical verse in Genesis, where it says God created Adam in his own image, later we see these narratives as mentioned in Sahih Muslim.
So what's wrong with this narrative, Sayyid? So we have this biblical narrative that God created mankind in his own image. Now why does this go against the concept of Tawheed? Even for a Christian, for example. The reason it goes against the concept of Tawheed is because we believe, as monotheists, that that God is unlike his creation. If he is unlike his creation, then none of his creation can be created in his image. Now this is the biblical narrative, which of course most Muslims would reject. Yet now this tradition which we quoted from Sunni sources suggests that one, Adam was created in the image of God, which is once again going against the concept of Tawheed. And two, you mentioned the interesting part there. He was how many cubits tall?
60.
So if Adam was 60 cubits tall, yeah, point one, and point two, Adam was created in the image of God, how tall is Allah?
Well, according to that, it would be 60 cubits. Allah would be 60 cubits.
And what do we know about Allah? Is he within a time and space, or does he have height?
Absolutely not. He's not confined
so
to time,
you have
space,
contradicted this aspect of Tawheed.
Absolutely.
In regards to this. So this is where we're saying that the biblical narrative of Tawheed is similar to this tradition in Sahih Bukhari. Did you say it was from Sahih Bukhari?
This is from Sahih Muslim, book 40, hadith number 6809.
Now we have to bear in mind, Sayyid, you brought Ibn Uthaymeen here. So we have the theology of Ahl Sunnah. With regard to Sunnis, you have the orthodox Sunnis, which are Ash'aris, which make up most of Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah. These are orthodox Sunnis, and then you have a subsect of Sunnis, which you would call Wahhabis, which generally came in later generations, following the movement of Muhammad ibn Abdul Wahhab, who revived his early ancestor Ibn Taymiyyah. And so essentially what we want to do is we kind of want to give these guys a bit of justice to say, okay, they have this hadith now, and at first glance it seems anthropomorphic. What have the Ash'ari said regarding this hadith? And what have the Salafi said regarding this hadith? So if you go to an Ash'ari scholar, for example, I have Imam al-Nawawi, one of the greatest Ash'ari scholars that ever lived actually, and he lived in the era in the mid 13th century, and he says regarding this hadith, Allah created Adam in his image. This is one of the traditions of the divine attributes. Some scholars refrain from interpreting such traditions. They say, we believe in such traditions, but we also believe that their literal meaning is not intended. Rather, they must carry suitable meanings. This is in fact the opinion of the majority of the companions.
Unlike what was claimed in Sharh al-Aqidah Wasitiyah. Remember what Ibn Taymiyyah said? He said that it's the belief of the Salaf to literally take these traditions and accept them.
Yes.
Literally.
And remember, Imam Nawawi came in the 13th century as well. Yes. In fact, this is more cautious and more appropriate. Another group of scholars believe that such traditions must be interpreted into meanings that are suitable to promoting Allah, the all-exalted, against such descriptions. Now, one thing that you must pick up here. He said that there was no position in Ahl Sunnah to take these hadith by their literal meaning. So therefore, what is he saying, Sayyid? That this position, that if you take them literally, yes, that you will go astray, that you are not considered the Sunnis. However, he was unable to interpret that part where he said he was 60 cubits tall.
You're stuck.
Because you're stuck. So they won't take the literal meaning. They said we won't take the literal meaning. They say the literal meaning will put you into anthropomorphism. and Sayyid, the belief of anthropomorphism is the belief of giving human attributes to God. To say Allah literally has a hand, a face and a leg. So this is the difference between the Ash'aris, Orthodox Sunnis and the Salafis, i.e. the Wahhabis. Now inshallah we're going to go into a timeline to see about when this, obviously a whole lecture regarding the Wahhabi faith has to be done.
Yeah, because what we inshallah plan to do is deal with each tradition and show what the books have said, what the scholars have said, and obviously what the Ahl al-Bayt have said regarding this issue. So I just want to conclude on one more point, and this is from the same book, Sharh al-Aqidah Wasitiyah, volume 1, regarding Allah having a body. Okay, and this is page 233, and he says, your claim that affirming direction for Allah implies that he possesses a body. We would dispute with you regarding the word body, al-jism. What is the body for whose purpose you are driving people away from the affirmation of Allah's attributes? Do you mean by body something that is formed from various things which are in the need of one another, each of which cannot go on except with the unity of these parts? If you mean this, we do not approve of that. We say Allah is not a bodily being in this manner. Whoever says this affirmation of his implies a kind of body, then he's saying a mere claim, and it's enough for us to say that this is not acceptable. But if you mean by body a self maintaining itself, describing as a befitting it, then we do affirm that. We say Allah the Exalted definitely has an essence maintaining himself. So meaning what they're trying to say here, if you're trying to say there's a body and it's a dependent body of something on need of something else, we will reject it. But if you're saying it's an independent body, then we have no issues. Do you understand?
And Sayyid, this is one of the biggest scholars of the Salaf. Ibn Taymiyyah is one of the biggest scholars of the Salaf. So remember when I mentioned this divide between the Ash'aris and the Wahhabis? The Wahhabis will bow down before Ibn Taymiyyah.
So I just want to...
They consider him a great scholar. So this statement that he's just mentioned is that we have no problem in affirming that Allah has a body. So long, and he gave his own interpretation to say, so long as what? As it's independent.
It's self-independent, yes. Yeah. It's getting sustenance from itself. Now, I just want to finish up on the hadith of the Ahl al-Bayt regarding what it means by image. And this is from Sheikh Saduq's book, Kitab al-Tawheed, the Book of Divine Unity. It's available online, you can purchase it. And it was a letter was written to Imam Musa Kazim alayhi salam. Okay? And it was asked regarding Imam Musa Kazim alayhi salam, regarding one of his companions, and namely another individual as well. So the two Hishams, they're known as the two Hishams. I wrote to Imam Musa Kazim alayhi salam, asking him about what Hisham ibn Hakim said about the body of Allah, and what Hisham ibn Salim has said about the image of Allah. So he replied to me, leave the confusion of the baffled and take refuge in Allah from Satan. Things are not as the two Hishams claim. Now, one of the accusations made against the followers of Ahl al-Bayt Islam is that the companions of the Imams also took the literal meanings of these verses. Firstly, it should be pointed out, a companion of the Imam is not hujjah for us. The Imams themselves, they are hujjah for us. And as we can see, even if the two Hishams held this position, Imam Musa Kazim alayhi salam corrected them for it. And just on a side note, I just want to point this out before concluding the show, and that is that there is actually no authentic tradition regarding these two Hishams actually believing an anthropomorphic opinion of God. What we do have is a Sahih tradition mentioned in Al-Kafi volume 1, which states that Hisham ibn Hakim rejected this notion. So I just wanted to conclude for today's show. Inshallah, you will be hearing from me and brother Zen.
We've just touched the depth, inshallah. I know you guys are going to be touching for more. Inshallah, we can go to more depth, go straight into our next show, inshallah, and give a lot more traditions and explain the interpretations of these verses in regards to the Shia theology and in regards to Sunni theology on the position of Tawheed.
Okay, guys,
Assalamu alaikum. Thank you so much for your time, guys.
محمد رسول الله.